Hi guys, Aaron here. Welcome to my channel, Keep Painting Minis, where we keep painting minis. And today we'll be painting these two witch hunters, Galen and Doralia Ven Denst. Try to say that twice. So join me right back here and let's get started. Hey guys, since we're base coating with contrast paints, we'll start with a primer that looks a lot like Wraithbone, and I make that up with white Stynylrez res through the airbrush with a couple of drops of beige Stynylrez res mixed in. First thing we're going to do is go in with a 1-2-1 mix of contrast Hellsar Blue and contrast medium to undercoat our black leather areas, and you'll see that that's going to develop a really cool blue edge highlight for us without doing any more work. Now when I mix my contrast paints, because you guys all know about the Citadel pots, I pull out one of these dropper thingies, pipettes, and that way I can dispense drops of each paint precisely and get the right mix. So I'm going in where all the black leather would be and undercoating with this mix of contrast paints. Now as you'll see, the best way I've found to apply the contrast paints to avoid the splotchiness is to really load up the brush and try to limit the number of brush strokes and try to limit the pressure I put on the brush against the model. Let the model take the paint off the brush, wicking the paint off the brush, and then while the contrast is still wet, go in with a dry brush and pick up the pooling. And as you see, with that approach, I get a fairly smooth and consistent and lack of splotchiness application of the contrast paints. Now we're going to go in over the blue with contrast Black Templar. And now you can see this really cool effect with that bright blue underneath on top of a bright primer, and you can see those blue highlights through the Black Templar. Now we're going in with the Wildwood contrast for Galen's leather coat. Again, these flat surfaces are tricky, and we will have some splotchiness, which we'll clean up later, and I'll explain my technique for doing that. But the way to avoid splotchiness as much as possible is to really load up that brush and not put much pressure from the bristles onto the model. Let the model take the paint off the brush, and then keep an eye on your surfaces to wick away any mottling and blotchiness and pooling while it's still wet. Okay, and now for Doralia's leather coat, we want a brownish red, and we're achieving that here with these two contrast paints, the Flesh Terror Red 4-3 against the Gore Grunter Fur, and you'll see we get a nice rich brownish red for Doralia's leather coat. And you see here again, I'm limiting my strokes with the contrast paint. The brush is very well loaded up. I'm limiting the pressure against the model, and I'm keeping an eye out for the pooling and the splotching, and I'm going in with a dry brush, not a dry brush, but a dry brush to wick away the pooling while it's still wet. And that's really the best we can do. And then, frankly, the secret to cleaning things up, as you'll see later, is to come in with a glaze over the top to smooth things out later in the process. And just quickly, we're going in with the same mixture of contrast paints for Galen's pants and the inner vest jacket. And with those contrast colors down, we're looking now just like this at this point. Again, a little bit of splotching, but we'll take care of that later, as is always part of my process with the glaze over the flatter surfaces. Now we're going in with ivory for the inside of the leather coats. And the ivory is from Monument Hobbies Pro Acryl line, which has become one of my favorite go-to lines of paints for the opaques. Of course, as you can tell from all of my videos, I truly love the Citadel contrast, but I also love the Pro Acryl for the opaque colors. And now we're going to paint Galen's bedroll with skeleton horde and 6 drops of skeleton horde, 1 drop of militarum green. Militarum green's a strong paint, and you can see we get that sort of khaki green color that I was looking for by way of that mixture. And of course, using that pipette, it's easy to get a precise 6-to-1 mixture. And now we're going in for the leather satchels and belts and the like with my truly favorite brown contrast paint, and you'll see why. This is such a one and done. This is really talent in a bottle, this stuff. You just touch it to the surface, and especially when you have highly textured surfaces, you get perfection for a leather finish with such ease. Now we're going in with the Pro Acryl Bright Ivory to undercoat the portions of the model that are this light colored wood. I guess that's ash wood. You wood experts can let me know in the comments. This color will go on the stock of the crossbow and also the shaft of the arrows, and also the stakes that the witch hunters carry. I guess those are the through the heart of the vampire stakes. So we're going to undercoat with the ivory, and then as you'll see, we'll come in with skeleton horde for the shading. And another one of my favorite contrast paints, Skeleton Horde, so useful for so many purposes. And here we're going in to shade the light wood, and also I will give those ropes on the crossbow 2 coats to have a little bit of a variation in tone between the rope on the crossbow and the light colored wood. as you see, at least in my opinion, this skeleton horde over that bright ivory is another sort of one and done. The bright edges just pop right out. And now we're going to use some traditional Citadel shades to take care of the flame on the torch. We'll start with the yellow on the entire flame, and then we'll move a little further up and cover that with orange, and then we'll move a little further up and cover that with the crimson color, and then we'll come in, as you'll see in the next step, with some black for this sort of smoke and soot look at the very tip. So now I'll come in with the contrast Black Templar for 2 parts on the torch. That is, inside the cage is the fuel that's burning, which is wood or coal or some such, that I'll color black, and later I highlight it with a bit of red. And then at the very end extent of the flames, we'll hit that with a little bit of the Black Templar. The idea is that sort of the smoke and the soot, which is how real fire looks when it's burning this dirty coal or wood or whatever is inside the torch. Okay, now I'm coming in with a little Citadel Mournfang Brown, just for the wooden stock portion of the pistol. Next, I'll take care of all of the silver metal bits with my favorite silver, the Vallejo Metal Color line Dark Aluminum. So that includes the cage on the torch, the shoulder armor on both models, the barrel of the gun, the torso armor on Galen. You guys will have to tell me if I'm pronouncing that wrong. And the metal parts of the crossbow. And next we'll get our depth and our shading on those silver metallics with the good old standby Citadel Nuln Oil. And you'll see that I'm not bathing the metallics with the Nuln Oil. I'm being selective about where I deposit the shade so that I avoid over tinting the flat surfaces, and I try to just really focus on getting the paint into the recesses. And now we can see that those metallics have some depth to them. They're not just sort of artificially bright and shiny and flat. And now it's time for the gold metallics. My go-to gold undercoat is Citadel Retributor Armor. It's just so reliable, covers so well. A nice true gold color. And then we can shade with whatever tint we like. In my case, as you'll see in the next step, we're going to go in with Reichland Flesh Shade. And now we've got all the gold bits undercoated. We'll go in with that Reichland Flesh Shade to get our depth and our shading and give it a little bit of an antiqued, older gold look, which seems to suit vampire hunters. And now I want to add a little depth and shade to the feathers on the arrows, so I'm going in with a 1-to-1 of Space Wolf Gray and Contrast Medium to get some shade in the recesses of those feathers, and then as you'll see the next step I'll come back and clean it up with a little titanium white at the edge of the feathers. And now for a pop of color, and following the box art as well, we're going to go in with the Screaming Pink for the handles, handholds, hilts of the swords and daggers. Next I'm going to color Galen's hair with a 1-to-1 of the Space Wolf Gray and Contrast Paint, and I missed filming it, but you can see it's actually still wet. I caught it afterwards. The Contrast Paint applied to his conveniently textured hair. And next we're going to base coat the skin tones, specifically the face, because that's the only skin that's shown on these models, with my favorite skin tone base color, Guilliman Flesh. Next is Reaper's Concrete Gray, one of my favorite grays. I use it for bases, for stone and all that, and also, in this case, Galen's mustache and eyebrows. And now I'm bringing in the Citadel Rackhearth Flash to shade down the recesses of the ivory that we used for the inside of the leather coats. So just hitting the recesses there and trying to feather it out as I move away from the deepest recess. And then I'm going in with the titanium white pro acryl for the highlights on the interior coat folds and also the very edges. And for the seal that hangs from Galen's lapel, I'd painted that with ivory and shaded it with Skeleton Horde, and then I edge highlighted with the titanium white. Now we're going in for what I call the contrast paint cleanup step, which is a thin glaze, in this case of burnt red, which matches the brown-red contrast color that we mixed for Doralia's leather coat. And that's applied and let dry and applied until we're comfortable that we've smoothed out any blotchiness sufficiently. And here's what that looks like. And now I'm going to put the Pro Acryl Burnt Red on my palette and the Bold Pyro Red, the brighter red, on my palette, and I'm going to do some additional recess shading and top of the fold highlighting with those two colors. And here's what that looks like with the highlighting applied. And in hindsight, I think I could have gone further. I might have even mixed in a little orange to really push the contrast. But I'm still certainly pleased with how her coat came out. Next, we're going to take care of the contrast cleanup for Galen's brown leather coat with a glazed down mix of dark umber and golden brown and glaze. Very light. Again, apply and let dry, apply and let dry until you get the smoothness that you're interested in, eliminating the blotchiness from the contrast paints. And with that final step, stagehand, the velvet curtain please, and reveal. As always, I can't thank you enough for joining me. I hope you enjoyed watching the painting as much as I enjoyed painting the model. If you're enjoying the channel, don't forget to hit like and subscribe and share the video with those who might be interested in. Until next time, I can't wait to see you here again on the channel. All the best and keep painting minis.